Okay, we're in Joshua. We're making our way through Joshua. And so today we're going to start in chapter 11. So just to kind of catch us up, of course, Joshua is the leader of Israel. Moses leads the people through the promised land, but he dies before crossing the Jordan River. The baton of leadership goes to Joshua, and he brings the people across, and they're pretty much fighting and taking over the land which God had promised to them. And it's been somewhat uneventful, except there have been battles that were lost that they should have easily won. And then we find out, well, it's because the people had not followed God's instructions. So, and now we're in chapter 11. And so, there are still groups or peoples who say, hey, wait a minute. Who are these guys? Because 400 years is a long time, right? So, and we're not gonna become your citizens of your country, or we don't want to move. So you have a group of leaders who say, well, what we're going to do is we're going to band together. We're going to unite and form an alliance, because together we should be able to defeat them. Does that sound weird? Not if everything goes well and you have a true alliance, right? So that's where we find ourselves on chapter 11. So let us begin. Okay. When Jabin, king of Hazor, heard this, he sent to Jobab, king of Madon, and to the king of Shimron. See, they're really tough. Lots of place names which really don't mean a whole lot to us, right? And to the kings who were in the northern hill country, and in the Arabah south of Kinneroth, and in the lowland, and in Naphoth Dor on the west, and to the Canaanites in the east and west. So Canaanites we hear a lot of in Scripture, Amorites we hear a lot of, but not some of these other guys, right? The Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Jebusites in the hill country, and the Hivites under Hermon in the land of Mizpah. They came out with their troops, a great horde, in number like the sand that is on the seashore, with very many horses and chariots. So what picture does this give us? It's like what? Sands on the seashore. So they've really amassed a lot of troops, right? And it's just not the foot soldiers, but what? The cavalry, horses, chariots. So they mean business. At least they're putting on a show like they do, right? And all these kings joined their forces and came and encamped together at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. Oh, man, right? So if you didn't have God's promise, it would be pretty scary, because you have a huge number of people and they've gathered en masse, okay? So in sands that are on the seashore, what does that kind of sound like a little bit, right? So it's not only letting us know that there's lots of troops that are gathered, but that in a sense is what God promised to Abraham, that you will have descendants. And he mentioned the stars in the heavens and the sand on the seashore. Oh, so, right, just having that means, okay, the people of Israel are going to need faith, just like God required faith of Abraham. Go to the land where I tell you to go, right? So if you look at it only from an earthly perspective, right? But they look like the sand on the seashore. But that's what God promised to the descendants of Abraham. So if God is faithful, we won't be extinguished. See, all of that ties in together here. So we should kind of catch that. Okay? So, but why did all the kings do this? Because they don't want to get evicted, right? Hey, who are you? What do you mean God promised you this land? I don't know your God. Go away, right? So yeah. And so you have this, yeah, but it was our land 400 years ago. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. Well, at least we'd say that in the grade school playground, right? So, yeah, it's, so the way that the text kind of brings this out, it's kind of highlighting the sense of danger here. So, And now we should recognize this, and the text is going to move on. Okay? Let's see what happens. And the Lord said to Joshua, after he sees enemies as numerous as sands on the seashore, right? Do not be afraid of them. Okay, so do not means you're not scared, but don't get scared. No, this is really you're scared, stop being afraid, which is in most cases how do not be afraid is used. Not always, but most cases. So he sees this and he goes, oh my goodness, we're in trouble now. And God says, don't be afraid. For tomorrow at this time I will give over all of them slain to Israel. You shall hamstring their horses and burn their chariots with fire. So the victory will be complete. So hamstring their horses, right? What does that mean? It means they will no longer be fit for war. Okay? And burn their chariots. So their ability to wage war will be brought low. So Joshua and all his warriors came suddenly against them by the waters of Merom and fell upon them. And the Lord gave them into the hand of Israel, who struck them and chased them as far as Great Sidon and Misropoth Maim, and eastward as far as the valley of Mizpeh. Okay? I'm not a geographic whiz, so... And they struck them until he left none remaining. And Joshua did to them as the Lord had said to him. He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots with fire. So, hamstrung their horses, literally that would be what? That would be harming their legs so they're not fit for war. Okay? Metaphorically mean doing whatever so they're not able to, right? Able to wage war. So, we don't know whether this happened literally, but the thing is the horses are not capable of, right, being used for war again. So God says you need to take them out so an enemy can't come later and use these against you. So it's not just defeating the enemy in a battle, but minimizing their ability to wage war, which is also very important if you're fighting a war, right? So you want to keep your enemy from having the ability to fight back or attack. Okay? So so at first we would not be sure, but the way it describes it, it's a pretty thorough whomping. Okay? And so the Israelites gathered and they fought, but you would have thought that the way the chapter started, they would have either lost or maybe they would have had a stalemate. Okay? But God gave them the victory. Okay. So that's that. But there's still more. So let's continue on, because this is a chapter of various conquests, and we'll find out that by and large they will conquest the land, but not completely. There will be issues. Okay? So 10 through 15. And Joshua turned back at that time and captured Hazor and struck its king with the sword. For Hazor formerly was the head of all those kingdoms. And they struck with the sword all who were in it, devoting them to destruction. There was none left that breathed. And he burned Hazor with fire, and all the cities of those kings, and all their kings Joshua captured, and struck them with the edge of the sword, devoting them to destruction, just as Moses the servant of the Lord commanded. But none of the cities that stood on the mounds did Israel burn, except Hazor alone, that Joshua burned. And all the spoil of those cities and the livestock the people of Israel took for their plunder. But every man they struck with the edge of the sword until they had destroyed them, and they did not leave any who breathed. Just as the Lord had commanded Moses his servant, so Moses commanded Joshua, and so Joshua did. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Moses. So there's a comparison being made, right? That there were battles that took place with Moses before crossing the Jordan, right? And Joshua, in a sense, is doing something similar to what Moses did, okay? Of vanquishing the enemy, of destroying them. If you either you need to incorporate people and have them become part of your nation for real, or you need to vanquish them. Because if you kind of do this halfway thing, then what ends up happening is that this hatred simmers, and it will just pop up later, and you'll have to deal with it in the future. And that has happened to us as a nation. Well, we've done some stuff, and then what? We have to go back, right? So we have this notion that we will turn everybody and they will all like us. Well, we'll free them and they'll become democratic and they'll love us. Well, it doesn't seem to work out as well as we thought, right? So, maybe democracy can kind of flourish in some places, but even democracy requires a certain mindset and culture for it to work. And so, and if you don't have that, democracy very well can collapse, because that has happened in the past. So, Rome at one time was a republic, right, with a Senate, and it had some type of representation. Now, not like us where everybody votes, but but there was a Senate and there was sort of representation, and yet, that didn't work out, and then you have these Roman Caesars or emperors who basically just take over and ruled, and you have a Senate, but it's more of a figurehead sort of thing going on, and right, and then the generals war and take over and all this other stuff. So yeah, so you can kind of see how this can happen. And if Israel were defeated, the enemy would do the same thing to them. This was standard business, And in fact, if it wasn't for some of the changes that the West has brought into the way that we view war, of a just war and how we wage it, it's always been very nasty. And if you're defeated, you have no rights at all. And so, yeah. So in a sense, we have I'm glad we have a different view of things now. But what I'm saying is that when you look at human history as a whole, we kind of miss the point on how wicked we are. And that atrocities are the norm. So, yeah. Which is why today, so this whole Gaza thing really kind of, what? Standard fare. Now our ability to cause harm is greater because we have more technology and whatnot. Okay, let's continue on, because let's see what happens with Joshua. Enough of this free-form commentary from Pastor. Okay? So, let's look at 16, and we'll start from there. So Joshua took all that land, the hill country, and all the Negev, and all the land of Goshen, and the lowland of the Arabah, and the hill country of Israel, and its lowland from Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir, and as far as Baal-Gad to the valley of Lebanon below Mount Hermon. So it's kind of saying, how far has Israel's conquest, what land does Israel control? And now it's quite a bit. Maybe we wouldn't think so based, because countries are larger now and whatnot, but yeah. So we're able to have more span of control because of technology and communications and whatnot. Okay. And he captured all their kings and struck them and put them to death. Joshua made war a long time with all those kings. There was not a city that made peace with the people of Israel except the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. Did you catch that? There was not one city. So what's the implication of this? Is that the people don't want peace, right? And so, it's nasty. Okay? They took them all in battle. For it was the Lord's doing to harden their hearts, and they should come against Israel in battle, in order that they should be devoted to destruction, and should receive no mercy, but be destroyed, just as the Lord commanded Moses. Now, what do we make of that? Right? Think about Pharaoh. Right? Did God not harden Pharaoh's heart? Yes. When did he harden Pharaoh's heart? And why were these people's hearts hardened, and yet this other group not? So if we're kind of looking at how God worked in the past and using that as a template, could be wrong here, right? But it seems to be that that the groups that God hardened, well, right? He's hardening them even more. And those who are willing to have peace, he doesn't. So the tendencies that they have are amplified. Okay, so if they are enemies, right? Okay, we're going to harden their hearts so that way it's going to come to a head and the enemies will be gone. And if they're not, okay. So there's a lot of stuff going on. But at the end of the day, it's going to be Israel's land. They're going to control it. And if there are other groups that are there, well, they're supposed to what? Well, be under Israel's leadership. And there are. What was that one group that was brought up earlier? Where Joshua says, "Oh well, we made an agreement with these folks, and now we can't do bad to them, right? And so, well, what can we do? Well, we'll make them fetch our water." Joshua figured out some compromise or something, right? But that ended up remaining so. Okay. And Joshua came at that time and cut off the Anakim from the hill country, from Hebron to Debir to Anab, from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua devoted them to destruction with their cities. There was none of the Anakim left in the land, of the people of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod did some remain. So Joshua took the whole land according to all that the Lord had spoken to Moses. And Joshua gave it for an inheritance to Israel, according to their tribal allotments, and the land had rest from war. Okay, so right now, the conquest is mostly done. Okay, so and I think whoever is kind of around, they'll be kind of hesitant to kind of want to fight Israel just because of all that has happened, which is kind of what you want. Okay, so it is kind of interesting because it says only in Gaza, in Gath, so even Gaza still exists today and it's still mentioned. So, do you guys know we'll take a 30, do you guys know that where Palestine came from? Because it didn't exist till Rome created it. So in 70 AD, we all know about that. There's this giant rebellion, right? And Rome burns Jerusalem to the ground, etc., etc. Well, between 130 and 135 AD, there's even a greater rebellion. And Israel is independent for about 2 years. Independent meaning that Rome has to gather all her armies together to totally crush and wipe out Israel. And it was bad. I mean, not only is Jerusalem destroyed, but Jerusalem, everyone who's Jewish, kicked out. And Jerusalem is renamed, so I forgot some other name, but it ends up becoming Jerusalem later. But Rome changes the name from Judea to Palestine. And that's where we kind of get that. Well, Palestine was really there was this group of seafaring people called the Phoenicians, who were not genetically, they were more Greek genetically, who kind of had this area in Gaza. That's where their kind of stronghold was. And so it's really kind of a play on words to say, that because the Phoenicians this was not their land. But it's kind of that kind of connection where that kind of comes from. It's basically saying that this land will not be for its people, but for foreigners. That's with this kind of name. And so it's not like Palestine existed before the Israelites were there. It ends up becoming a name that Rome gives. And of course, it ends up becoming the name for that area. But it is kind of interesting how all of that happens. So, and so what ends up happening is after Rome basically destroys Israel. That you have this huge diaspora or whatever diaspora where they scatter everywhere because like 900 or something villages are burned to the ground, destroyed. Jerusalem completely and in fact the church, the early Christian church, they weren't. Rome didn't target Christians, but if you were Jewish, they still kicked you out. And so it's at that point where the first bishop of Jerusalem ends up being a Gentile, not ethnically Jewish. So from the beginning, when you have a first bishop of Jerusalem, they were all ethnically Jewish until 135 AD. And then the Gentile Jewish guy is named Mark, I believe. So, okay, enough. Now you know a little bit of the origin and history. I'm a geek on this stuff. Are we ready for chapter 12? Okay, so here we are. Most of the kings are defeated, and things seem to be okay. Chapter 12. Now these are the kings of the land whom the people of Israel defeated and took possession of their land beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise. A whole bunch of names and a whole bunch of places mentioned, most of which won't make a whole lot of sense to us. From the valley of Arnon to Mount Hermon, with all of Arabah eastward, Sihon, king of the Amorites, lived in Heshbon, ruled, so on and so forth. But I mean, you go through this list and it's just a whole bunch of people and place names that are listed. And this just lets us know how complete the conquest is. It's not 100% complete, but it's extensive. And all of this has happened. So I'm not going to read all this stuff because it's a mouthful and none of it will make sense. But it does say that there are part of the, talks about the half tribe of Manasseh. And so Manasseh, half of the tribe will have land on the east side of the Jordan, and then the other half will have land on the west side of the Jordan. So, and we'll see that in the division of land in chapter 13. Okay, so that's kind of mentioned here. And then chapter 12 goes on to the kings defeated by Joshua, right? And, well, it's the same thing, right? It just lets us know that it's pretty significant, right? So one thing in verses 1 through 6, it mentions Og, king of Bashan, one of the remnant of the Rephaim. Okay, and that's the word for giant. Well, it's plural, so giants, right? So, okay, were these big people for real, or were they giants because they were powerful? We don't know, right? But the thing that it's mentioned, it just kind of highlights that through Joshua, God even defeated these giants. So they were formidable. Okay? And so, I mean, later on, Goliath, right? Who is a Philistine. Now, the Hebrew text has him like at 9 feet something. But the Septuagint and other Old Testament manuscripts have Goliath at 6 feet something, almost 7 feet, which was super huge then, because then the average man was 5 foot something. I mean, today we're a little bigger, but 5'5" or something like that. So that would have been a giant, but not 9 feet. So that's, and so that's, the Hebrew text is, I don't know how that ended up being, but early translations don't have that. So, so here you have, and I don't know, these people may have been just a big people. And so we decided, I would like to just see those guys, to see what they look like, and they very well may have been, generally speaking, giants. So, yeah. But that lets us know that the magnitude of the victory, okay? And then so verses 7 through 24, you're going to have 31 kings who are defeated. And they're all listed. And they're all mentioned. So this lets us know the magnitude of the victory, right? And it mentions this. It mentions it, the kings of the land. I think it mentions 31 kings a couple times. So the repetition lets us know the completeness and the fullness of this victory. Okay? And so that's where chapter 12 will take us. And then in 13, it's going to go, yeah, but there's still a little bit of land remaining. Oh, okay. So what has happened is a lot, but not everything is done. Okay. So what chapter 12 does do is that it lets us know that God is responsible for these victories. Yeah, the people of Israel fought, but God had orchestrated such things that they would not have been able to conquer the land if God had not enabled them and used events and caused things to happen so that they could capture the land. Okay? They were too disorganized. Their army was not that strong compared to a lot of the well-established nations, especially when they gathered against Israel, and Israel still conquered them. So that's what 12 leaves us with. All 31 kings. But look how 13 starts. Now Joshua was old. Oh, we didn't think about that, did we? But Joshua was one of the spies that originally scoped out the land and went, oh, right. And he was one of two who said, we can defeat these guys because God is with us. Oh man, they're a land of giants. So maybe they went and observed the Rephaim. And they said, we'll never defeat these guys. And there it is. So Joshua wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. He was a young man as one of the spies originally. So he's probably what? Probably in his 60s now. Okay? Don't know exactly. But now Joshua was old and advanced in years. Probably older than 60 then. Okay? And the Lord said to him, you are old and advanced in years, and there remains much land to possess. Okay. This is the land that yet remains, all the regions of the Philistines. Right? So where are they? Right? And all those of the Geshurites, from the Shihor, which is east of Egypt, northward to the boundary of Ekron, and is counted as Canaanite. There are 5 rulers of the Philistines, those of Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron, and those of Avim, the south, all the land of the Canaanites. And so, geographic, where are these guys that are still in the land that needs to be Israel, right? And so we can kind of see all of this, and it's saying where it is. Right? So up north, and today what will be Gaza, so that there are these portions. What is meant to be Israel still is not as far north as it should be, and it's not all the way to the sea. Okay, in all places. Okay? And so let's go to 6b, and we'll start there. This is God speaking. I myself will drive them out from before the people of Israel. Okay, so yeah. You're going to fight, but I will make sure that you win. Okay? Only allot the land to Israel for an inheritance, as I have commanded you. Okay? And so inheritance will, in this section, will be mentioned twice. Okay? Now therefore divide this land for an inheritance to the 9 tribes and half of the tribe of Manasseh. Okay, so you have half of the tribe on the eastern side of the Jordan. The other half will be on the western side. And so now it's going to be, well, who's going to be where? And that's what will happen now. It's the division of the land into each territory. So each tribe will get an allotted portion of land. So it's not as if, okay, all the tribes, well, we'll just live together in the same geographic, sure, there's Israel, and all the tribes are part of Israel, but then each tribe has its area. So it would be kind of like, maybe more akin to the United States before the Civil War than after. Because after the Civil War, I mean, oh, well, I'm from the tribe of Georgia. What? Like, nobody really cares, right? So, there's, before the Civil War, we saw ourselves as a nation, but we also saw ourselves as a collection of states. And so now it's more national and less state. Okay, so that's probably be the best way to view it. It's kind of how we saw ourselves before the Civil War. Okay, so they're certainly Israelites, but they're also their own tribes. And so in future years, there will be a civil war, right? There will be a split, of the tribes. Okay, so we have this going on, right? All the stuff, but this still needs to be done. So it starts out saying Joshua's old, but the focus is on what? Right? There remains yet very much land to possess. I still have stuff for you to do, Joshua. I'm not going to let you retire yet. So God still wants Joshua to lead Israel. Okay? And so I don't know why this was brought up. Maybe Joshua was thinking, okay, hey, I'm an old dude. Maybe I just need to pass on, the leadership to someone else. But so this is the stuff that we can only infer from the text. Okay? All right. Well, and the thing is, it's old, but that's also the word that's used for elder. So there's this kind of double entendre. Yeah, he's old, but, by using that word for old, but, he has a lot of experience. He brings a lot to the plate with his age. So he's old, but he has experience. He's wise. Let's not put him out to pasture yet. He's not feeble, okay? Unlike some other politicians. Okay. Verse 8. Are we okay? Because this is, yeah. Okay, so with the other half of the tribe of Manasseh, the Reubenites and the Gadites received their inheritance, which Moses gave them beyond the Jordan eastward, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave them from wherever that is, Aroer, which is on the edge of the valley of Arnon, and the city that is in the middle of the valley, and all the tableland of Medeba as far as Dibon. I should get a map or something. But hey, we know how that goes now. And all the cities of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon as far as the boundary of the Ammonites. And Gilead and the region of the Geshurites and the Maacathites and all Mount Hermon and all Bashan to Salekah and all the kingdom of Og and Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth and in Edrei, and alone was left with the remnant of Rephaim. So yeah, all the stuff that's kind of going on there, right? And it says this is what's going on. But it leads us to verse 14, which may not be a big deal, but 14, what's said in 14, will be repeated at the end of the chapter. So you have these groups, and there will be allotted lands, but there's going to be this one tribe who will not have any land. And so that's mentioned in 14 and also, I believe, verse 33. Okay? And so here's verse 14. And the tribe of Levi alone, Moses gave no inheritance. So they're tying in what? Moses and Joshua, in a sense, they're connected, and what Moses, right, had done and said is now happening with Joshua, right? Because did Moses actually, right? He didn't lead the people into Israel, even though they do have some land on the east of the Jordan, right? To the tribe of Levi alone, Moses gave no inheritance. The offerings by fire to the Lord God of Israel are their inheritance, as he said to him. Okay, so offerings of fire, what is that? Burnt offerings. Yeah. So in other words, part of the temple duties. right? So in other words, they're what? So they're to live off basically the monies that go to God. So we go, well, it's supposed to go to God. Well, God is saying, well, yeah, but these guys are doing what I want them to do. And I'm not going to allow them to do other stuff. They're going to focus on being priests. And so by not allowing them the property rights of the other tribes, it's like you can't do anything else. You're forced, right? But I don't want to, Dad, I want to be a farmer, Dad. Wrong tribe. Okay. So yeah. So that's the idea of gift or tribute. So this is the whole idea, is that, yeah, it's from the people, but from God through them. Okay? Just like in a sense they go, oh yeah, God gave us this land. Sure, we had to fight, but what? But God ensured that we received the inheritance. And that was used a couple times, right? So it's already slated ahead of time to be theirs. Okay? So all of this land stuff, it's a bit to slog through because it comes up with a lot of names and we're like, oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, we will find that they are kind of spread out, but their focus is really being priests. The synagogues, you don't have to be a priest, you can be an elder. Okay? So synagogues are a later development, and you don't have to be from the tribe of Levi. And so synagogues really are a development because, well, look at where maybe we can't look, but you're going to live in places where you cannot go to the temple. You live too far away. And Sabbath is what? There's a certain amount that you're allowed to journey on the Sabbath, and after that it's considered work. Right? So, well, then what do you do? Well, and that's the idea of, there are certain feasts that you come to several times a year. Those are the biggies. And if you can't make it, you schedule and you plan to make it on those. So you have like Yom Kippur, and you have Pentecost was one of those, and I'm trying to think of there's one other one that doesn't come to mind right now, but there were three. Okay, and so in a sense, that's the workaround. The synagogues existed to support the temple. The temple was always the main deal. Okay, even though synagogue becomes the primary avenue through which people worship God, learn the scriptures, so on and so forth. Okay, does that make sense? And you had to have something, because unless everybody lived in Jerusalem, right? And so what the northern tribes did after the northern tribes leave, they set up alternate worship sites. They go, we don't want people going down to Jerusalem because, they're now a different country. We don't like those guys. And so they kind of set an alternate fake worship site up north, and then they put one down south near the border. So, and the idea was to kind of intercept people who are going to the temple. Oh, well, why go to the temple? Worship here. But God wasn't pleased because they were doing their own thing contrary to God's command. So, long story short. Yeah. Okay. So now we have a group of people who are dedicated to be priests, and Luther kind of saw that as a picture of, in the New Covenant, of the pastoral ministry, is how he understood this. And so just as the priests of old, their inheritance was not about earthly gain, because they focused on doing God's tasks related to worship and sacrifice and God bringing forgiveness to his people. So they needed to eat and they needed to live, and so this was set up. But by not inheriting land and being able to own property per se, this kind of ensured that apart from their priestly duties, they would be poor. So, yeah. Okay. So, next is going to be the tribe of Reuben. Okay, and that's 15 through 23. Okay. So, some of this is a bit tough to kind of slog through. See, now listen to how this starts out. And Moses gave an inheritance to the tribe of the people of Reuben according to their clans. Like, well, what's going on here, right? Moses is dead, right? So the territory was, so what's really saying is that Moses ahead of time was saying, this is where this tribe needs to be, so on and so forth. So Joshua is really executing what Moses passed on to him, right? Which God had given to Moses. So, and so Moses is mentioned here that, yeah, this is God's doing, but it's God through Moses, and Joshua is carrying it out. Okay, so we have kind of this indirect kind of line that's happening here. Okay, so gave an inheritance to the tribe of the people of Reuben according to their clans. So the territory was from Aroer, which is the edge of the valley of Arnon, the city that is in the middle of the valley, and the tableland of Medeba. So it's all these references which basically might as well be in North Korea, almost, right? And so on. Okay, and it mentions name after name to this place and that place, right? But let's follow this, okay? And the border of the people of Reuben was the Jordan as a boundary. Oh, okay. Well, we know, yeah, that makes sense. So they're west, it's west to the Jordan or east to the Jordan River. Okay. This was the inheritance of the people of Reuben, according to their clans with their cities and villages. So you have the tribe, but what exists within the tribe? It's mentioned, it doesn't really just mention in passing. Clans. See, so you have tribes which are, right, groups. They're a subgroup of the Israelites, but within each tribe you have clans, right? And so how would, I don't think we have any equivalent to that. I guess if you had somebody who maybe grew up in a city and had really, and never moved, and his identity was with that city, I guess we have people who are.
High schools in a large city.
Yeah, I guess.
Go back to the Beach Boys song about my school.
Wow. Yeah. In St. Louis, they go, "Oh, what school did you graduate from?" It's always high school in St. Louis. Always. Like, why? I don't know. But there it's a big deal. I guess because if you know where somebody went to high school, you come, oh, well, that means whatever, right? Is anybody here from St. Louis? Okay, because I noticed that. It was like, what's going on? I'm like, well, I would hear that as a sort of thing where two people from St. Louis would kind of ask that. So it could maybe, yeah, so there's the clan identification as well. Okay, so the tribe of Reuben, now they officially get their land. Okay, well, okay. And yeah, inheritance is mentioned as on bottom of page 4. I mentioned the repetition emphasizes the importance of inheritance as a promise and fulfillment from God. Okay, and then Gad, that's 24 through 28. Let's see if we can go through this section. Okay, Moses gave an inheritance also to the tribe of Gad, to the people of Gad, according to their clans. Same thing, right? So I'm part of this clan, which is part of this tribe, which is part of Israel. Okay. Their territory was Jazer and all the cities of Gilead, half of the land of the Ammonites, to Aroer, which is east of Rabbah, and from Heshron to Ramath Mizpeh and Betonim, and from Mahanaim to the territory of Debir, and to the valley Beth Ra'am, so on and so forth, right? And then where? To the lower end of the Sea of Chinnereth. Okay. Which one is that? I'm trying to think. Is that the? I'm trying to think. because is that the Dead Sea or the Sea of Galilee? Because, the seas have different names, right? Eastward beyond the Jordan. This is the inheritance of the people of Gad according to their clans with their cities and villages. So, should have scraped up a map somewhere, right? So, there is Gad, okay? The word territory, Gebul, is kind of a demarcation of identity. So each tribe kind of has its unique place in the promised land. So we could kind of even see this as Christians, right? Well, we're all Christians, we're part of the church, and yet how do we live as individual Christians? We're not just defined only by being Christian, part of God's church, but we also are given different tasks and we also have different abilities. So in a sense, it's kind of like that. So each Christian also has a role in the church. Okay? So, we can kind of use that as an analogy. Okay? If we want to kind of draw a connection there. See, so we have our greater identity, but that doesn't mean that we all do the exact same thing and we all have the same roles. Okay? And the last group that's mentioned in this chapter is the tribe of Manasseh. Okay? So, and that's 29 through 33. And Moses gave an inheritance to the half tribe of Manasseh. So this is on the what? Western side. It was allotted to the half tribe of the people of Manasseh according to their clans. Their region extended from Mahanaim through all Bashan and the whole kingdom of Og, king of Bashan, okay, and all the towns of Jair, which are in Bashan, 60 cities, and half Gilead, and Ashtaroth, and Edrei, the cities of the kingdom of Og and Bashan. These were allotted to the people of Machir, the son of Manasseh, for half of the people of Machir according to their clans. So, okay. So these are the inheritances, okay, inheritance that Moses distributed to the plains of Moab. Okay, so they are to see these things as what? Coming from God, an inheritance. Notice that word, it's used a lot. So, yeah, they live there. Well, Deb was saying it right. None of us really own land. We're just renting it. Well, maybe similar, but here, God is the owner and we're living in a particular place as opposed to Uncle Sam taxing us or whatever. So, yeah. So these are the inheritances beyond the Jordan, east of Jericho. But, verse 33, but to the tribe of Levi, Moses gave no inheritance. God, Moses, Jacob. Moses isn't alive to do this stuff, but this is the chain of these things, right? So Jacob is carrying out what Moses told him to do. So it is interesting because you have direct interaction once in a while that is mentioned in Scripture, and then you have indirect stuff from God. Okay, and they're both considered to be from God. Okay, but to the tribe of Levi, Moses gave no inheritance. The Lord God of Israel is their inheritance. Notice that, right? Just as he said to them. A little different than what was said before. Okay? So, in other words, you're set apart to do God's tasks that he gives you to do. So don't focus on owning property or land or whatever. So, so there are some links to the pastoral ministry in this, but not completely. I own a house. I own land. So it's, oh, well, Pastor, you shouldn't because. But then I guess, I don't think we would want pastors to, well, we'll take care of you to the day you die. Well, I don't know if we want to do that. So anyway, well, we'll stop there. Okay. So some of this in Joshua is a bit ponderous because it's just a lot of telling us what has happened, and a lot of it doesn't really mean a whole lot to us. And when we don't know all the specifics of, unless we want to really geek out on geography, let's pan out and just kind of focus on the bigger idea. Okay, well, who's responsible for this? Who is fulfilling his promise? Who's making sure this happens? And that is part of the bigger palette that we need to see here. Okay, that God is ensuring this is happening, and he's faithful to his promises. Okay? And so this lets us know that. So what would we say in the new covenant? Has God promised us a land or territory? The promised land, right? Which is what? Heaven. Yeah. So, in other words, so the church, right, if we're looking at God's new covenant people, is not a state, right? It's everywhere, okay? So it's a completely different reality, okay? So, I mean, if you have a Christian nation, such things can develop, but the thing is that is not, God designates his people to be wherever they are as his church, and there's not promised a specific piece of geography that they are to claim as their own. Okay? My kingdom is not of this world, Christ said. Okay? And so in the new covenant, neither is ours. Okay? All of that stuff with Israel, important. We want to know it. But all of that was what? God's working through what? Human history to bring the Savior. Okay? And he did that through a particular people who lived in a particular place. Okay? So now that all of that is accomplished, right? We're everywhere. Okay? Joshua 14 and beyond next week. We pray. Our Father, there is much in Joshua that is so ponderous to us because, well, it's just weird names that really don't mean a whole lot, even to many who have read the entire Old Testament, because they're not mentioned all the time, and they're not in our memory of, oh, that's this place or that place. But give us patience and give us the ability to see your hand working through that particular geography, that we may understand you better and how you dealt with your people, and how all of this in some way is pointing and directing us to your Son, who is the promised Messiah, not only for ancient Israel, but for all time, in whose name we pray. Amen.